Hello, I'm Joy Burns-Roger, and this is your Government in Action. Thank you for joining us. Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Philip Davis, continues to set the tone with international colleagues during his contribution to the plenary session of the 9th Summit of Americas on June 10, 2022. He stated that the Americas are challenged by crisis. Todd Isaacs has that story.
While addressing the plenary session of the Summit of the Americas, Prime Minister Davis pointed out that what the challenges faced by individual nations had in common was that they could not be solved by any one nation alone. He said multilateral engagement at the highest levels happens too infrequently, certainly when it comes to important issues to the Caribbean. But if the work of the summit continues, if the will to cooperate endures, if words turn into action, change can lead to progress, and we can move forward.
I'm here to represent my beautiful country, the Bahamas, and I do so with an enormous sense of urgency. The Bahamas has the distinction of consistently showing up in the top rankings of countries most vulnerable to climate change. When hurricanes come, as they do with increasing frequency and intensity, they make headlines in your countries for a few days. But in our home, we are left with the grief and devastation, with entire communities destroyed, and with the high debt burdens associated with recovery. And perhaps worst of all, with the understanding that the next Category 5 storm is likely to arrive sooner rather than later. What happens in high emissions countries does not stay in high emissions countries. The risks we face are not theoretical, or abstract, or far off, or occasional. It's true that no corner of the earth is immune to the risk of climate change. Here in California, for example, wildfires and droughts represent major challenges. In the Bahamas, our geography and our size mean that we live with the knowledge that one well-placed storm can wipe out our economy and indeed much of our country. Hurricane Dorian alone in 2019 caused destruction worth 1/4 of our GDP, and it wasn't even focused on our capital city of Nassau. So we can't afford more summits or conferences with only smiles and good intentions. We need to get to work. Small as we are, we believe we have an important role to play in building solutions.
Prime Minister Davis said that it is why the Bahamas has advocated for the creation of dedicated, accessible, and affordable climate financing.
In fact, in our small island, big ocean state, our seagrasses and mangroves play and will continue to play a critical role in acting as a carbon sink. These blue marine ecosystems can capture up to dozens of times the amount of carbon as tropical rainforests. We need resources to be able to conserve, protect, and restore these blue carbon sinks, just as we need resources to make a transition to renewable energy, and just as we need resources to recover from previous storms and make our country more resilient in the face of future hurricanes. Carbon markets are an important bridge to a net zero future for all of us. And we intend to be the first country in the world to develop and trade blue carbon credits.
Prime Minister Davis noted that the real test will come when all delegations get back home and are faced with the opportunity to follow through on objectives. For your Government in Action, I am Todd Isaacs.
Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for disaster preparedness and emergency response, the Honorable Miles LaRota, flew into Grand Bahama and Bimini for one day on the weekend of June 10th. It was here that he consulted with island administrators, local government practitioners, members of the Grand Bahama and Bimini Disaster Consultative Committees, community volunteers, and heads of government departments in the affected areas of West End Grand Bahama and Bimini in the aftermath of potential tropical cyclone 1. Matt Mora reports.
State Minister LaRota and delegation spent more than 2.5 hours touring those parts of West Grand Bahama that were adversely affected by heavy rain from potential tropical cyclone 1, including Pindus Point, Hunters, Lewis Yard, 8 Mile Rock, and West End. The state minister was accompanied by Mrs. Isla Dean, acting permanent secretary, the Office of the Prime Minister's Disaster Management Unit, Captain Stephen Russell, director of the National Emergency Management Agency, Mr. D. Bradley King, Training and Disaster Management Officer, Ministry of Works and Utilities, and Mrs. Andrea Newbold, Chief Welfare Officer, Department of Social Services, Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development.
We wanted to go on the ground and get an assessment from the local consulars, administrators, and see for ourselves the effects of that weather system. We toured Pindus Point. We went into 8 Mile Rock where we inspected the 8 Mile Rock High School gym. That is one of the largest hurricane shelters on the island. And so we needed to have a site visit to see firsthand some of the problems they have there. Issues we discovered were bathrooms that were not working properly. Also, the roof needed fixing, the air condition work, and there's a urgent need of a generator. We inspected certain drains in the community, especially in 8 Mile Rock, that were working, but local councillor Jimmy Smith said that there is a need for more.
After assessing the seawall in West End, Grand Bahama, State Minister LaRota and his delegation boarded a flight for South Bimini. The delegation then took a ferry to North Bimini, where they were given a tour of the areas adversely impacted by potential tropical cyclone 1, mostly flooding from heavy rains, by local government officials including Glenn McRoe, Chief Councillor, and Triska Rowe, Deputy Chief Councillor, Bimini District.
We went into Bimini where they also had a drainage problem. We looked at the hurricane shelter there at Gateway, the gymnasium. We toured other facilities. There's a major problem. I was briefed by the MP for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, Minister Obi Wilchcombe, and that involves trying to shore up the shoreline where there's some beach erosion. It's a really, really serious problem that needs to be addressed urgently. And on some other parts of the island that have had issues with storm surge. So in all, it was to get a first-hand view, listen to those local councillors and also those administrators on the island.
State Minister LaRota spoke on the way forward in the aftermath of Saturday's visit.
We had individuals from social services, also the Ministry of Works, who would have done, some inspections, and they will have other inspectors visit those islands to get a greater assessment as to the needs, and then that would be taken to the cabinet by the various ministers with a view of bringing relief to those individuals. We will try to maximize our strengths, minimize our weaknesses. We'll collaborate with those on the ground. We'll listen to professionals when it comes to disaster preparedness. The public have a role to play. There are some things that the public will have to do well. The government must do its part, but citizens must do their parts as well.
Minister LaRota's delegation departed Bimini late Saturday afternoon, but not before taking the opportunity to once again promote disaster preparedness. For Your Government in Action, I'm Matt Mora.
Minister of Grand Bahama, the Honorable Ginger Moxie, made her contribution to the budget debate this past week. Minister Moxie has maintained that when the Davis administration was elected, they pledged to pay particular attention to the issues facing the people and economy of Grand Bahama Island. Minister Moxie also maintained that the Davis administration understands the people of Grand Bahama have endured much, suffered much, and simply want to see results.
Who hasn't heard about CoLab? The Prime Minister, in his wisdom, gave the Ministry for Grand Bahama a new mandate considering the ever-perplexing issues, the uniqueness of Grand Bahama, and the devastation caused by the twin storms, Hurricane Dorian and the pandemic for our island. The mandate reads, partner with NGOs, businesses, other government agencies, and the community at large to assist with the basic needs of residents and for the growth and development of Grand Bahama Island. COLAB's primary goal is to ensure that the vision of the Ministry for Grand Bahama to become the home of maritime and logistics, the home of events and entertainment, and the home of innovation comes to fruition. This requires a focused strategic agenda and partnerships, both locally and internationally, to ensure that the basic needs of residents are addressed and for the further development of our island. In this vein, the new unit, COLAB, Partnerships for Development, represents the most significant increase in the 2023 budget with a new line item of $3.7 million. So let me tell you, first of all, how very proud I am and excited I am to be heralding in this innovative, transformational, revolutionary way to define the Ministry for Grand Bahama in this new day.
Also contributing to the budget debate this past week was Minister for Youth, Sports and Culture, the Honorable Mario Boleg.
As the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture, I am overjoyed about the budget allocation for my ministry. A 25% increase that equates just a little over $5.8 million, which will be divided among the three departments, youth, sports, and culture. This, Madam Speaker, will allow my ministry to further educate, impact, and empower the lives of our young people. Bring economic boost to the impact of sports in paradise while preserving and cultivating the authenticity of Bahamian culture.
More of your government in action when we return. Welcome back. Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Philip Davis, recently attended the local government leadership workshop at Super Club Breezes. He announced that the Inter-American Development Bank would conduct technical assessments for the installation of solar photovoltaic systems in Inagua, Acklins, Crooked Island, Mayaguana, and Long Key to assist with energy and the economic development. On Sunday, May 28th, the assessments got underway. Yentel Taylor has that story.
According to Mr. Alden Austin, an electrical engineer in the Ministry of Finance, the recent technical assessment visit to the power plant at Salina Point, Acklins, was one stop of many as an IDB-backed assessment team moves throughout the family of islands to analyze conversion to solar power in the archipelago.
The benefits of putting solar here is actually the goal for the government is to get off fossil fuel, so that's primarily. The next one is actually to reduce costs of producing electricity. As you can see now, it's early in the morning, we have a lot of sunlight out, so we want to use those type of energy to produce electricity. And so we have identified this island, and particularly this site, for that project.
The $80 million project is sponsored by the IDB. Also, on the assessment trip was a representative of the Bahamas government arm of the solar project.
We decided that we're going to do solar in most of the family islands. So we decided to start at the furthest island, which is Inagua, and come north. A lot of people would wonder, but why don't we start at our island and go south? Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Firstly, we have to right now we barge fuel down to these islands. It's become very expensive. And in most of the Family Islands, the government subsidizes most of the power in the Family Islands. It's not that you pay the bill and you pay for all the infrastructure. It doesn't work that way. So we decided that if we would eliminate a lot of the costs, it'll be less problem on the government and it'll help the environment. So we killed two birds with one stone.
Mr. Burlington Strawn, COO of BPL, also taking part in the assessment exercise, says the benefits of solarizing the islands will be many-fold.
And so we're down here with the team looking at renewable project sites for further penetration of renewable energy into the Bahamas energy mix. What we're looking to do is develop projects similar to that we did in Ragged Island. That project was our initial project. And what we want to do is use that same sort of approach as we push into various Family Islands. So right now, we are visiting 5 sites in the southern Bahamas to identify locations and sites and connection points that would make those projects possible. Currently, we're working in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance and their project execution unit in addressing the needs for these various projects, as well as having individuals from the IDB who are part of the funding mechanism being used with respect to what is being planned.
For YGIA, I'm Yentel Taylor.
Bahamas Information Services and Your Government in Action are proud to debut the first in a series of presentations by the Bahamas Department of Meteorology entitled Met Talk with Acting Director Mr. Jeffrey Simmons. This segment is a part of the department's expanded education and awareness campaign and is a collaboration between Bahamas Information Services, the Department of Meteorology, and the National Emergency Management Agency.
Today we're going to talk about tornadic activities versus tornado. A tornado is really the final stage of your tornadic activity. Tornadic activities include things like land spouts, water spouts, whirlwind, and even downbursts and microbursts from thunderstorm clouds. There are different stages of tornadic activity, just as there are different stages of cyclonic activities. We in the Bahamas, we are familiar with a tropical depression, a tropical storm, and a hurricane from Category 1 to Category 5. All of these are considered cyclonic activities. Similarly, tornadic activities deals with land spouts, water spouts, and microbursts, as well as a well-defined and developed tornado, which can actually cause massive damage over large areas. Here in the Bahamas, for the most part, we usually see microbursts from a thunderstorm cloud or land spouts and water spouts. Land spouts generally form over land and they last for about 5 to 10 minutes and they can cause serious damage. Wind speed in these land spouts can be up to 50 miles per hour, which means that they can cause damage to your roofs and your houses, to trees, and even to your vehicles. Tornadoes start from an F0 with a minimum wind speed of about 65 miles per hour, and they actually go all the way up to an F5, which is an excess of 200 miles per hour. So, in all stages of tornadic activities, we ask the public to be cautious because a land spout, as you can see, and a downburst or microburst can cause damage and can eventually be fatal if necessary precautions are not taken.
This has been Met Talk with Jeffrey Simmons.
of your government in action when we return. Welcome back. Sensitivity training for parliamentarians from across the political landscape, including both the upper and lower houses, were recently hosted to a special session on legislative reform that focused on the importance of such measures to the empowerment of women and girls. Matt Mora has that story.
The Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development, through its Department of Gender and Family Affairs, in collaboration with UN Women, held a sensitization session for parliamentarians at the Paul H. Farquharson Conference Center. Minister of State in the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development, the Honorable Lisa T. Ramming, said the session targeted the country's parliamentarians in recognition of the importance of legislative reform, including legislative frameworks for the empowerment of women and girls. The session was conducted by Mrs. Tony Broadburn, Representative, UN Women Multi-Country Office, Caribbean.
I know for a fact that my colleagues enjoyed it. They came out in record numbers. They're both males and females parliamentarians. And of course, we had our person from Indy, is Maxine. She came, and that was so good, from the opposition, Maxine Seymour. And I know my colleagues asked a lot of questions. They were very engaged, and I'm sure that they got a lot out of it. And now they get to see what we are faced with in the Ministry of Social Service and Urban Development as it relates to laws pertaining to children, boys, women, and girls. And so when we bring them before the table, they're now more in tune with it because how it affects the wider society.
The session covered a wide range of topics, including mainstreaming gender equality across the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, gender equality and women's empowerment across the SDGs, a focus on the Spotlight Initiative, CEDAW, the Declaration on Human Rights, Convention of Bellum de Poro, better policies for gender-based violence legislation, equality versus equity, gender-responsive budgeting, marital rape, abortion, and understanding gender and gender equality, among many others. Ms. Broadburn said there were 3 key takeaways from the session.
I think the first takeaway is understanding gender equality is good for men and it's good for women. It's something that will support our economies and assist with citizen security. First takeaway. Second is legislation that does not reflect gender equality is not good for the Bahamas. It's not good for the Caribbean. It's not good for the world. And easy, or in terms of low-hanging fruit, like legislation around sexual assault, is something that can be addressed and should be addressed. There's better practice across the region, and the Bahamas is a leader in so many things. It should not be falling behind on that. My third takeaway, I was really excited and impressed by the parliamentarians in the Bahamas. They're dedicated to the people of the Bahamas. They're dedicated to making sure that they represent their constituencies effectively. And they're open to learning anything and more of things. But they are grounded in their determination to serve their people in the best way they believe. And that's impressive.
Ms. Broadburn said local, regional, and global societies benefit even more when there's equity and equality between sexes, men and women, boys and girls.
Something as simple as thinking about the kind of time that it takes to take care of elderly people, children, persons living with disabilities. If that falls only on women, that means they're not able to fully engage in other forms of work in society. That means the government is not able to benefit from their work. The community is not also able to benefit from their work. It's an honor to be able to care for your family. And that's an honor that men should be able to participate in as well. Another issue is around violence. If you think women should only be one way and men should only be one way, you may find yourselves in more fights as a young man with other young men and demanding certain things from women because you think they should give it to you because you're a man and they're a woman. That's not healthy for peaceful relations.
Attorney General Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder was among the parliamentarians who participated in the session.
Personally, I'm an advocate certainly for equal rights amongst men and women. in all regards, and protecting the most vulnerable as well. So I support the legislative amendments that we discussed today in the session, and we're working with social services very closely to put forward the necessary amendments, really on all the matters discussed. Certainly matters related to abortion are probably a little bit more sensitive, politically sensitive, than some of the other ones that were discussed, but all in all, you know, you have to look at it all as a full picture, providing the necessary protections for the most vulnerable and maintaining equality amongst your people.
Officials at the Department of Gender and Family Affairs and UN Women say societies such as the Bahamas do much better when there's equity and equality between the sexes. That's men and women, boys and girls. For Your Government in Action, I'm Matt Moore.
On the occasion of Her Majesty, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, a reception was held at Balmoral Club Thursday, June 9, 2022. For more on this story, we have Wellington Roberts.
Addressing the celebration were Governor General, His Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Cornelius A. Smith, and Acting Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Investment and Aviation, the Honorable Chester Cooper.
Upon her ascension to the throne, Her Majesty made the following statement to the people of the Commonwealth, and I quote, "My whole life will be dedicated to your service," end of quote. During her 70 years reign, she has unquestionably lived up to that promise with extraordinary grace and distinction. She has come to represent steadfast service, constancy, and a fervent example of faith and hope. Indeed, these are principles which all of us should embrace and emulate, particularly during these turbulent and uncertain times.
The heritage, the language, the history, the traditions of the islands of the Bahamas are a daily reminder of the shared connection and enduring close relationship we share with the United Kingdom. As head of our Commonwealth of Nations, many Bahamians remember with great fondness the many visits of Her Majesty to our country. We are delighted that this tradition was extended and that our Platinum Jubilee celebrations were highlighted by the recent visit of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. I look forward to continuing to promote close ties between our nations, working together to overcome the many challenges of these times and to maximize the opportunities of the future.
A toast to the Queen was offered by the Governor General. Taking part in cutting of the Platinum Jubilee cake were Governor General, the Acting Prime Minister, and Her Excellency Sarah Dixon, British High Commissioner to the Bahamas. Former Governor General, the Most Honorable Dame Marguerite Pinling, was also in attendance, along with other dignitaries.
That is all for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Tune in next week for another edition of Your Government in Action. I'm Joy Burns-Roger. Have a good evening.